Hey, well, welcome everybody. My name's Terry, and I came from Perforce. Can I get a show of hands of how many of you guys actually use Perforce in your daily work? Oh my God. Okay, well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I'd just like to share a little bit of information with you about some of the things that we're doing coming up, and maybe we wanted to try to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you guys might have in versioning large binaries, especially with your game systems. So these are some of the things we wanted to talk about. We've, increasing storage and longer wait and build times, and what happens if your teams are global. So we all know that technology really improves a lot of what we do, and it makes games much more realistic and just absolutely superb. Some of the stuff I've seen coming out lately is really awesome. But it also introduces challenges, and especially for people in the video game environment. So binaries get ever larger, builds take ever longer, and all of that really impacts your productivity. And so, it starts out innocently enough, small team, but pretty soon things kind of get out of hand. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about a little bit today, how we can probably help you address that. So if you take a look at certain things like uncompressed 4K video, 1 minute takes about 5.3 gig according to this slide anyway. So, and that, an hour could be up to 318 gigabytes. Imagine trying to sync that or try to put that in some sort of a repository mechanism that really doesn't handle large files very well. It wouldn't be very friendly. And in most versioning systems, we don't actually keep track of just the delta between versions. You actually have a compressed whole copy of each new version of the file. And that's the way we do it. It's the way a lot of other SCMs do it too. So it's not only video, there's also multi-channel audio, all kinds of different graphics formats, the differences between various video formats and audio formats. And then if you have compiled binary files, in most cases, I think a lot of people are using other third-party tools other than Perforce to actually archive that stuff or warehouse it. But you could actually use your Perforce server to do that too. So all of this just takes a lot of time to deal with. Maybe you have continuous integration that you've employed. You might be part of a large team. You might be the remote guy, or some of your team members might be very remote from you or very remote from the resources that they need to use. And you could have thousands of changes a day. And all of that just takes so much time. And that means that build times get longer and even longer. And then if you happen to be the remote guy, then your wait times get longer and longer. And it's just the nature of the beast. And unfortunately, there's not a lot that we can do in terms of physics. You can only transfer stuff across a wire so fast. But you want a system that's robust enough to actually help you handle that. So there are a lot of challenges with AAA games. Your average AAA game has hundreds of thousands of files. Wow. My system's going to be wigging out here. Could be, say, a terabyte of code and assets at the head, with the head revision. That's just the latest revision of all the stuff. Maybe 50 gigabytes of changes a day, depending on how often your artists and your sound engineers actually check stuff in. And you might have more than 100 team members, or you might be a part of a team working with a fairly large group. Anyway, so what can you do about it? Well, one of the things that you can do is try to move those assets closer to the user. There's lots of strategies for this, but a good distribution strategy is definitely one way to handle that. You want to try to keep track of everything and audit all the stuff. So this is one of the things that I think we really are superb at, is helping you understand where things are, who has it, is it locked, who has the lock, and what have they been doing with it lately? And you need to make it resilient so that if, for example, these are your critical assets, this is your IP, the stuff that you rely on so heavily in your day-to-day, you want to make sure that it's backed up and it's easily available. So you want to have some sort of security and high availability and the ability to recover. And so just kind of taking each of those points step by step, we actually have had a strategy for moving assets closer to the user for quite a while. One of those is called the Helix proxy. It's probably the most commonly used mechanism. It's really simply a file cache, and what it does is you can take your large assets, and even if you just stand one up and you have nothing on it, the first time a user checks out something large, he'll have to wait or she'll have to wait until they get that asset into the proxy, but once it's there, it's there. And if multiple team members are connecting to that proxy, then they will pull from the proxy and they won't pull from the long distance. There's no rebuilding, no generation of any kind of a packaged file or anything like that for delivery. They get the asset at whatever version that they require. And the proxy will maintain new versions of that asset. So when the user checks the stuff in, they use the proxy just like their normal server. It places the file on the proxy. There's a little bit of a wait while we transfer it back to the main server, and then now the proxy has the latest edition once it's gotten all the way back to the master server. And if you want to get more complicated about it, there are things called Helix replicas, and we have many different kinds of replicas. They fundamentally replicate the main server, and if you're replicating the main server, then you're actually copying all the version history and the assets. So it's as though you have kind of a slave system or slave server sitting closer to the user. And those are really important things. And then lastly, if you have software developers that are using Git and they want to use Git, you may actually have kind of completely different repo mechanisms for your artists or between your artists and your software developers. So you don't actually have to do that now. We actually have a companion tool now called Helix for Git, and Helix for Git actually allows you to store Git repos themselves just as they normally would be inside the standard Perforce server. I'll explain it in a minute, but what it does is it allows you to sort of mirror Git repos into the Perforce server, and then you can build across all of those assets. So we do actually allow Git repos in their entirety, just without any translation between Git and the normal Perforce linear history. And so we put this in a new depot type. There's a new depot and a new archive layer that's a part of the normal Perforce server, and it allows the P4D to manage or provide SCM services for both Git and for P4. So your artists can continue to use P4, put their stuff in their natural locations where they enjoy it, where they use it anyway. And then you can use Git for your software developers, and they can clone, fetch, push, just like they normally would. It looks like just another remote to them. They can't tell any different. Then the nice part about that Helix for Git thing is that I can take Helix for Git acts a little bit like that Perforce proxy I just mentioned just a little bit ago. And I can put that out in user zones where there are remote users. And so what happens then is they clone from that Helix for Git remote, and they push back to it, and then that Helix for Git remote makes a connection back to the main Perforce server and deposits the stuff there. So get this stuff closer to the user. It really helps them out, saves you a lot of energy. And by the way, all this stuff was introduced this year in 2017-1. We're about to release 2017-2, and as of today, we're releasing a new product called TeamHub. TeamHub was an acquired technology for Perforce that gives you Git collaboration around, or gives you workflow collaboration around Git repos. It's kind of a Git management tool as well, and then we use Helix for Git to mirror those repos into the main Perforce server. The nice part about that is that you end up with the replication strategy if you already have one, or the proxy strategy if you already have one. All that stuff just sort of plugs right in and fits very neatly into it. Then the last thing, or not last thing, the other step would be to make certain that the system is resilient, right? You want to give a lot of you control very, very sensitive IP. I've got in the next, we've got some call them case studies or examples that we use where this was actually a really important point. So you want to protect that intellectual property. You want to prevent unauthorized access. You want to keep the history on that forever because there may be some points. We've had companies in the past that have used our environment to prove in a copyright challenge that they actually had this idea before anybody else did. And they just went back in the Perforce history to actually find it. So then, and you need to have full recovery of your main repositories. You want to make sure that you have disaster recovery mechanisms, or at least a way to kind of archive that stuff off for restore if you need to. And then you want high availability. And the way we would kind of provide high availability is through that replication infrastructure that we were kind of talking about before. Okay, so let's talk about some examples. There was a large global game company that had a digital asset management problem. Another AAA game company that needed to address some scale. A game engine and game producer that wanted to implement CI at scale. And those were all fairly big challenges for them with the infrastructure that they had previously. So in that first example, it was a large game company with global studios. They have studios all over the place. We've got kind of a little graphic map to kind of show that. They had an asset management problem, and the solution that they had in place was extremely error-prone and really poor performing, to the extent that when they were getting a lot of their multi-gigabyte assets to remote users or between studios, if the transfer died, it would take 12 hours in a lot of cases to get the stuff from place to place. And if the transfer died, it had to be restarted again. And this was continually happening. It happened at least once or twice a week. And so they ended up with a management team just for the purpose of getting stuff back and forth. And they also wanted to control the company's IP. They had people putting stuff in Dropboxes because of this file transfer issue. They had all kinds of other mechanisms that were sort of outside the company policy. So they wanted to have all the company assets in one place. And they needed to create a distribution system, or they wanted to actually utilize high-speed distribution systems that they already had in place, that IT already had control over. And that included things like the ability to be able to lock assets. So this is what this kind of looked like. The master server the master Perforce server was down in Australia. There was a disaster recovery mechanism that was pretty much everywhere where you see the word edge and master. So even though we didn't draw them into the drawing, they were pretty much all there. So then other users were connected via these proxies we talked about, the file caches. Edge servers are actual copies of the master server in a way, but what they do is the users actually log into the edge server and do all of their work on the edge. So the master server wasn't responsible for understanding who had what checked out in terms of the edge server. So it was kind of an interesting thing. If you want to talk to me down in the expo area afterwards about what that looks like and how that's set up, I'd be happy to go over it with you, because it might actually help some of you quite a bit. And then they had other users, they had other third-party users coming in through firewalled access, either via SSL or HTTP, et cetera. So what they, let me go back again here. What ended up happening, the other thing is that link that goes across Africa actually goes the other way. It just didn't look as pretty on the slide. It actually goes across the Pacific to the edge server that's in the US, or to one of the edge servers in the US. And so what they ended up doing is actually use an existing high-speed pipe that they had between those systems, and another tool set that's not a part of what we sell, but what we're fully compatible with it. And it actually, I think the benchmark was that we were doing 10, 20, and 100 gigabyte files, and we saw something like a 25, it was like 25 times improvement in file transfer between just a native Perforce file transfer using this utility. So that's something we can talk about that too if you want to bring that up, if any of that stuff is much of a problem. So then the second company, their quote was that artists pay the price. And I think that's really the case, right? Artists pay the price for just having things get way out of hand on them and storage sizes getting so big. And so they described that the Helix version control system actually scaled with them. They could put assets of any size. They distributed the VCS around the areas where they needed it and got those assets closer to the user. Their artists actually preferred using our native tools to some of the other things that they did, except for the fact that there were integrations to the stuff that they use every day, like Photoshop and Maya, et cetera. And then there's a built-in thumbnail generation mechanism that they thought was really worthy as well. The other thing is that they wanted everything in that single version management realm, all the project history in one place, and that simplified their automation. And then this last one was they just needed to be able to drive CI across all the various things that they were doing. So they put in the replicated infrastructure, by the time they were done, they had about 90 terabytes of data, about 23 million files, and they were driving their DevOps pipeline continually through anything that actually came up. Every single commit was tested. Every single commit was built or generated some sort of a test case for them to actually run, and it ended up being thousands of DevOps and development transactions per day. So pretty compelling stuff in terms of size and being able to get work done. And the thing is that I think we've kind of proven that we're sort of really resilient. So now Unity has a built-in Perforce plugin or compatibility. It utilizes the existing topology. There really aren't any nothing special that you have to do except just log into your designated server. The user has control over their own work and their own assets. They can lock stuff directly from that UI. The status of who has what is automatically updated. Sorry, it just hit the trackpad. And then it's back-end versioning that you can really rely on. And then we also have plugins for other kinds of tools. For example, the P4 graphics toolset provides kind of point-and-click access to versioning, very much like what I'll show you in Unity. Then probably the most preferred version management client tool that we see is P4V. It's kind of the natural way people do their stuff. It displays all the status, has all the accessibility of versioning within Perforce. And then if you haven't seen it or you haven't used it, we have a new tool or a recent tool called Swarm, which is a collaboration around the stuff that's in the traditional P4 service. So, and then lastly, I think we'll kind of end on this. Well, we now have a whole, we're kind of on an acquisition path a little bit. We're trying to grow the company by acquisition, organically too, but a lot by acquisition. So we've acquired an ALM tool set along with that Helix Team Hub tool set and added that to the Helix core. So now we're fast and scalable everywhere. We've got integral ALM. You get the single source of truth, and you still get all the permissions protection that you got before. So let me, yeah. And by the way, if you didn't already know, you're in pretty good company. So there's a lot of companies that use Perforce. So I'm going to jump out here. All right. So now, okay. I guess I really should apologize for the fact that I'm really not a Unity user, but so my apologies for using the rollerball tutorial to kind of show you what's going on here. But the crux of this is that how do you access stuff? So it's pretty simple. I have all my gizmos down here in my project folder, and if I want to actually utilize Perforce versioning, I simply just check it out. Now, of course, you have to have all this sort of set up in advance, and I'll kind of run through that in a minute, but you just check that out. And what that gives you is a little red check mark next to the thing that you just checked out. And if somebody else has something checked out, you'll see a little blue one. If you're not at the current level of something, for example, if somebody's checked in something that you need to now pick up, the status is there. It'll tell you, hey, you need to pick this up. And so it's pretty simple. Go to version control, get the latest, and it pulls in the latest version, and that little indicator goes away. So, and then as far as getting work done, I'm just going to change the color here because that's really all I know how to do. Whoop. And then we save this, and now I can just simply check this in. All right. Now, the one thing about we're something called declared intent. And so we ask you to provide a reason why you're actually doing the check-in, right? And it's actually really important. So this is one of the ways we kind of keep track of what's going on and how you kind of archive all the work. There we go. So now that's checked in. So where did that end up going? Well, if we go to our version control window, if you will, we have a settings panel that'll come up in the inspector that tells me I have the Perforce SCM selected. I have a user account and a password that I log in with, and then there's something called a workspace that we can describe in a little bit that tells the system how to map files on my local workstation to what's actually in the versioning service, and then the server name. And then a few things, like, for example, if I make a change or something, I can automatically add files so that I don't have to do anything. If I just start, in some cases, in some other IDEs, when you when you actually double-click a file to open it and edit it, it will automatically check it out in Perforce. The Unity integration doesn't do that, but it's just because it's just a much more simple thing. So that's part and parcel how that is, and then where all that stuff ended up. Because one of the things that we can't really do with the Unity integration itself is really we can't go back and take a look at previous history. We can do things to kind of reset that, and this is one of the reasons why I think that our other client tools are maybe a little more popular. But if we wanted to go in and take a look at that recent history, we could just come over to P4V, and P4V will tell us, well, who submitted what, and let's see, whoops, I got a filter, don't I? Change that, there we go. So this is the last thing that was submitted. This is just sequential change sets when Unity actually checked out both the metadata file and the actual asset file itself at the same time. And then if Joe is working in this particular tool set, then he also can check stuff out. You'll notice that he has a pending change list with some files in it. He's actually locked some files, so if I want to, I can lock and unlock files if I need to. And then actually that status will show up back here in Unity also. So you'll see a little blue padlock, and if I click on this and I highlight what's going on down here, we'll click again, there it goes. It tells me that it's checked out on a remote, it's checked out remotely, that it's read-only because I don't have it checked out here, and that the asset's actually locked. So it's been locked by the remote, which means that I can't check in on top of Joe. So it's pretty handy stuff. So anyway, that was kind of, like I said, there's many more things that you can actually do in terms of using our natural UI, but the fact that we have integrations, all of this stuff is exposed in the API, so if you wanted to do something custom, or if you want to use a plugin that actually has a little more utility to it, then they have the ability to actually have access to all these various things. But anyway, that was kind of it. I just wanted to kind of show you briefly, how we can help support your large asset data. Once again, when we submit this, and if you submit it through the distributed environment, then what will happen is that all the changes will go back to what we call that master server, and all the history will be kept there. The other things I didn't really show you were things like how to actually kind of secure your IP, and if you want to come downstairs, I can probably show you a little bit easier downstairs in the expo area. And that's really kind of it. I'll leave some time for questions or comments or anything that anybody might have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer some up here. So go ahead. I think I want you to step up to the mic, actually.
So did you guys have any more plans to expand the Unity integration to like maybe where you could do swarm reviews from within the editor, or actually kind of manage workspaces?
That's funny that you ask. So just before I got out, so we've had this tool called P4 Connect, which is something that actually plugs directly into. It's an overlay kind of utility on top of the Unity UI, and it actually does most of the stuff that we show you in P4V. But however, because of some changes that happened in a recent version of Unity, it seems to be a little buggy. It hasn't been updated in quite a while. I think 2014 was the last time it was actually updated. But we've got some integrations coming out later in the year. I don't think that's one of them, but it's definitely kind of on the plan now. We've had a number of questions about it. So I think you could probably look forward, maybe, hopefully by the end of the year, but possibly in the next year, you could probably see a new version of that. And it will work directly from Unity.
Cool, thanks.
So, sure. Anybody else?
Hey, so working with a team before in Unity, we tend to have problems merging scene files because they're in YAML format. And even if we use Unity's YAML merge tool, we still see problems. With your Perforce Unity integration, is there any special steps y'all took to help out with YAML and scene?
This is a discussion this is a topic I wasn't really aware of before I came here, because typically, those Unity asset files are pretty typically just text, they're text-based instructions for the game engine to actually draw and render stuff in a certain way. And unfortunately, what happened apparently, at some point in time, Unity decided that it was okay to just insert or change or move things around in that file. And so unfortunately, because when we look at a file that is text, right, what we see is that, hey, line for line, these don't match up anymore. And so then in our merge tool, we'll actually show you that, hey, this has actually been modified or edited or deleted, and this has actually been added when they're actually the same segment of stuff in the Unity file. So I don't know. That's something I'm going to take back to the product team to say, hey, this could really be something we could help with. Is there some way, I'm not familiar with Collab, but the Collab apparently can do this, and I think it's because they just understand the index. They understand what each of the entity items could be in the file, and so they know how to match that up. And I think we could probably do something similar if we just worked on it a little bit. But I'm sorry, I'm just the technical guy who's standing up here giving you this speech, and I can't promise anything. But I will definitely take that back.
Cool.
Make that suggestion. Anybody else? Well, I really want to thank you for your time and attention. And like I said, I'll be downstairs the rest of today and for as long as it's open tomorrow. And if you have any questions, you want to see something more specific than you've seen here, please feel free to come down and talk to me downstairs. I'd be happy to show you and talk to you about it there. Thank you very much.